In 250 years of American history, never has a president been turned on this viciously by his own most fanatical supporters, not by Democrats, not by the establishment, but by the very people who once worshiped him as their savior. This is the man who spent years screaming at the top of his lungs that only he could make America great again. The man who swore he would end endless wars, crush inflation, and protect working families with tariffs. Yet today, America is dragged into a new war with Iran. His tariffs are making life more expensive for ordinary people. And now his own loyal base, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, Marjorie Taylor Greene, are publicly calling him grandpa, who should be put in a nursing home, questioning his sanity and accusing him of betrayal. This isn't politics as usual. This is MAGA devouring its own creator, a brutal civil war inside the movement that promised to restore American greatness, but delivered more war, higher prices, and broken promises. And today, we're going to show you exactly how deep this fracture goes.
Having a come to Jesus moment. I do not think they are having a moment of conscience. I think, and I would cut out Tucker Carlson because I do believe he is genuinely anti-war. But I think these other people are reflecting the comments and the feeling
their audience.
Of their audience.
Paying subscribers.
Exactly. And so they are trying to serve their audience. And that means that Donald Trump is in more trouble than we think.
Well, I mean, Ian, that's why it's a political story, right? I mean, the front runner for the Republican nomination in 2028 is Tucker Carlson, not Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I look at this and I think, you want to understand Donald Trump, understand the world he came from, right, which is New York in the 1980s, and there were sort of three dominant influences on him. One was real estate, one was the mafia, and one was WWF. And if you understand that, you kind of understand everything about him, right? Because real estate is why he sees everything as about a land acquisition. It's why he talks about Greenland and the Panama Canal and Venezuela, and the mafia is how he sees everything through the lens of how do I intimidate people to be loyal to me? And the WWF was all about sort of one time someone's my ally and friend, and then, oh my God, it's theater, I'm turning on them. And, I look at the fights between Alex Jones and Candace Owens and Donald Trump as basically like WrestleMania 1986. And the thing that and I was actually not a big wrestling fan, but I understood enough about it that at some point in time, the person who dominated those rings and those shows and got all the ratings got old. And the McMahons understood that after a while, Hulk Hogan was kind of no longer the thing that was going to get people to tune in. And I think what's happening now is Donald Trump is like yesterday's news for WrestleMania, and he's going to find out that the circus that put him there is going to want someone else because he just isn't able to command the same level of audience that he used to.
And Mark Elias, I think it's important that we sort of take the right lessons from this, right? I mean, one, it is, as Molly said, not about certain people coming to Jesus, aligning themselves with our warnings for our democracy about Donald Trump. No. Again, let me say that again. That is not why they are newsworthy. Mm-hmm. They're newsworthy because they represent where Alex Jones, Megyn Kelly, and Tucker Carlson, who are all business people, see their followers going, where they will continue to pay to go to live events, to go to conferences, to subscribe to podcasts, to pay for speaking engagements, where they think the energy and the heat map.
WrestleMania.
WrestleMania, exactly. But I think the other piece of it is where MAGA has been successful is in co-opting the culture around the political movement to keep the wrestling thing going. And I think I've started to notice that Democrats seem to be at least aware or cognizant of the importance of keeping an eye not just on people, but on culture. I think the Springsteen concert is really important. I think athletes feeling that there's a permission structure to speak out as they did at the Olympics, as a lot of NBA players did. WNBA players and coaches have been strong through every chapter of our politics. But I wonder what you think the lessons are in this breakup, other than sort of eating popcorn and reveling in its gory nature.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think, first of all, you pick three people who are the perfect, weather vane of the grifting right wing. So, like, you're right. They are looking where they can turn based on where their audience wants them to go, where the next dollar is to be found, where they can, where they can sell snake oil and lies to the people who follow them. So I think that's part of it. The second is, and since we're giving credit to, despicable right wing figures, I mean, let me shout out Andrew Breitbart, who said that culture is downstream, that politics is downstream of culture, and he was entirely right about that. And I sometimes talk to recording artists or actors or people who are very famous on the left, and I tell them that the right wants you to think you are a liability. They want you to think that coming out because they don't want you to be effective. But the fact is, politics is downstream from culture, and these large cultural figures who have a lot of cachet do lend both a sort of quasi endorsement, but even more importantly, they lend a cool to it all. I mean, when Bruce Springsteen is talking about these things, it is not just the words he is saying, but it is the fact that an iconic music legend is talking about these issues, and he is just an iconic music legend. And so I think that we make a mistake when we cede culture to the right.
Listen carefully to what they're really saying. This isn't a sudden moral awakening. These aren't principled conservatives having a crisis of conscience. These are seasoned political operators and media business people watching the money flow, the subscribers, the live event tickets, the podcast downloads, and realizing the wind is shifting. And that wrestling analogy, brutally accurate. Donald Trump built his entire political identity on spectacle, staged loyalty tests, and dramatic betrayals. Pure 1980s, WWF theater. Now, the same audience that once packed the arena is starting to boo the aging headliner. Hulk Hogan eventually got too old for the ring. The question is whether Trump is about to suffer the same fate inside his own movement. But talk on a panel is one thing. Let's see how this civil war is exploding in real time, with Trump himself firing back and the knives coming straight from his former inner circle.
On Tuesday, Megyn Kelly joined Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Alex Jones to slam Donald Trump's Easter truth message, one that called for the end of Iranian civilization. President Trump took note, and yesterday he fired back. In a sprawling Truth Social post, he called them low IQ, nut jobs, losers, and troublemakers. He added that nobody pays attention to them because they are not MAGA. In his telling, MAGA is him. While the president tried to project that people don't care about all of his former friends turning on him, his post about them was almost 500 words long. And that wasn't even the end of the fight. Owens responded by posting a screenshot of Trump's post on X and writing, "It may be time to put Grandpa up in a home." Alex Jones responded by saying the war in Iran has been a total disaster and that he pitied Trump, who he accused of suffering from dementia. And Marjorie Taylor Greene posted on X that she joined Owens, Carlson, and the others to help Trump get elected. They didn't change, he did. The question is, will Donald Trump's so-called betrayal of MAGA promises break through to the base? Joining us now, senior reporter for The Bulwark, Will Sommer, author of the Substack newsletter To the Contrary, Charlie Sykes, former Undersecretary of State and MS Now political analyst, Richard Stengel, and with me here on set, host of SiriusXM's The Dean Obeidallah Show, Dean Obeidallah, of course. All right, Charlie, I'm going first to you. I want your thoughts on how deep this division goes and if you think it's going to have any impact on the future direction of Trump and his party.
Yeah, it's really sad to see the end of such a beautiful friendship if these people had only been warned a few years ago. But the polls suggest, that the base is still behind Donald Trump and he's still far more popular than Tucker Carlson. But this is a drip, 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 bit by bit. Something's happening that hasn't happened before, which is that members of that MAGA base are hearing some really scathing criticism of Donald Trump. And if they're not breaking with Trump right now, there is some hesitancy. there are some doubts. My favorite part of that long Trump rant was when he said, "But I no longer care about that stuff." Look, Donald Trump has been a media creation for a very long time, and he's obviously, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a war, obsessed about the possible fallout. What I also think is interesting is that we may be seeing a preview of what MAGA will look like post-Trump, of the kinds of splits and divides that will take place after Donald Trump sometime exits stage left.
Will, you have a new piece out that looks at some of the divisions and the way in which this is all dividing up the MAGA influencers. And it seems like they've started something of a circular firing squad of accusations against each other. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, this all started when there was sort of a rumor online that the Justice Department was going to investigate MAGA influencers for being paid, whether it's by Israel or Qatar or whatever you imagine. Now, it seems like this investigation is not real, but it still prompted a lot of people on the right, people like Benny Johnson, to start saying like, oh my gosh, this is great. Finally, someone's going to get to the bottom of all this division. So you can see that they're almost excited to jail their own ideological allies because of disagreements over this war. And it tells you, I think, I mean, this is a MAGA civil war that's been going back to the Charlie Kirk assassination, even before that. And I think it's really hitting this breaking point at the point where you have Donald Trump really taking on people like Tucker Carlson.
Then Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson, even on some of their podcasts. Will, I want your thoughts on that. In particular, I sort of wonder how you see the president putting these people into different categories or buckets. For example, you know, how the credibility of these different voices in the podcasting space kind of match up against each other. I think, for example, about Ben Shapiro as well here, someone who has stayed much closer to this president on the war, on support for everything that the administration is doing right now, and kind of drawing a contrast between himself, his operation, and what some of these other folks are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for better or for worse, a lot of the dynamism and the energy in right-wing media right now is with people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, these sort of with maybe dissident right figures who are more critical of Israel, in some cases are actually anti-Semitic. They are the ones, I think, who are getting the big audiences, who are getting the views on YouTube, whereas figures like Ben Shapiro are losing their audience, people like Mark Levin, the Fox News host, who's very pro-Israel and very in favor of the war. So I think Donald Trump is kind of in a difficult position here, where on one hand, all of the popular media figures, whether it's people in kind of the Tucker Carlson camp or the Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan camp, kind of the more manosphere types, they're opposed to the war. Whereas the people who are kind of losing their influence, who seem a little stodgy, like Ben Shapiro, they're in favor of it. So I think Trump is losing a lot of his allies in the MAGA media.
Rick, how do you think J.D. Vance is navigating through this moment? Because on the one hand, he is, of course, on his way to Pakistan right now to help, broker peace, I guess, in a war that he's at least, or his allies have tried to tell the media he didn't support. He's long time sort of tried to build this reputation as an anti-interventionist, but this is his boss, so he's kind of had to back him here, too. And a lot of people believe that if he wants to have any shot of being the next president, he is going to need the credibility that comes from these exact manosphere, more deeply connected with young voters and low information voters as well. He's going to need them.
Yes, Antonia, and that's why being vice president is a double-edged sword. And lots of people never, ever want to be vice president. I mean, you know, the thing that's interesting is from that New York Times, the Maggie Haberman piece that we all have been talking about for the past few days, the vice president seemed to be the only voice in the cabinet that was willing to say to Trump, hey, this is not a good idea. This could really backfire. And that aligns with his bona fides as someone who was always against opposition, always against foreign entanglements. But now he has to be a good soldier, and Daddy told him, to go to negotiate this peace agreement in Pakistan, and he has to try to do it, and he can't. When you're negotiating, ideology is not your friend because you want to be as practical as possible. So I think he will discard that at the door and try to come up with an agreement. Although, of course, both sides can't even agree about what the 10 points they're supposedly agreeing on.
Charlie, do you think that Trump will be able to bring some of these people back to heel, back into the fold? He's done it before. In fact, even Megyn Kelly has referenced it, that she's been on the outs with him before. He kind of sucked her right back in.
Stop and let that sink in for a moment. The very people who helped build Trump's movement, who campaigned for him, who brought him millions of votes, are now publicly humiliating him. Candace Owens suggesting it's time to put grandpa in a home. Alex Jones accusing him of dementia. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, we didn't change, he did. And what does Trump do? He writes a nearly 500-word angry rant attacking them while the country is in the middle of a war. This isn't the behavior of a man in total control. This is a man watching his own creation slip away from him and panicking. Charlie Sykes just hit the nail on the head with that last point. This isn't some moderate Republicans turning on Trump. This is his own former allies, the hardcore MAGA voices who once stood with him at Mar-a-Lago, now leading the charge against him. The very people who helped create this movement are beginning to question whether Trump still represents what they signed up for. Here's the cold truth. Donald Trump is learning what every strong man eventually discovers: the movement you build through spectacle, loyalty tests, and wrestling-style drama will eventually demand new spectacle and new loyalty tests. J.D. Vance is caught in the hardest position of his career, trying to be a loyal vice president while maintaining his anti-interventionist image with the young manosphere audience that will decide 2028. The polls may still show Trump leading the base for now, but the energy, the cultural momentum, and the future of right-wing media are rapidly shifting toward Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and the anti-war voices. The old guard, like Ben Shapiro, is losing ground. This isn't just infighting between former friends. This is the beginning of post-Trump MAGA taking shape, whether Trump admits it or not. The circus that elevated him is starting to look for its next headliner, and the old star is feeling the lights dim. History shows these kinds of fractures rarely heal quietly. What we're witnessing may not be the end of MAGA, but it is very likely the beginning of the end of the Trump-dominated MAGA we've known. If you're watching this and you can feel that something fundamental has shifted inside MAGA, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly, can Trump still bring these people back in line, or is this fracture already permanent and irreversible? If you want to follow this civil war as it unfolds, because trust me, this is only the beginning, then subscribe and turn on notifications. We're not here to cheer for one side or the other. We're here to show you what's really happening behind the scenes. See you in the next one.